If you're watching this channel, it's because you don't enjoy watching the world squander what Christendom built, but you want to do your part. And chances are you've heard me mention a great means by doing just that. Email made by and for Catholics. Check out fidei.email. That's FIDEI.email. Built for Catholic individuals, families, organizations, and groups. They're private, secure, and of course, they're Catholic. And they're offering 2 months off on your first year for an annual subscription if you enter the coupon code Return to Tradition without spaces. That's the name of this channel, without spaces, at checkout. It's been widely reported that the Vatican keeps an eye on the content creators, your bloggers, podcasters, YouTubers, what have you, in the Catholic world. It's been widely reported that they keep an eye on us through a Roman dicastery somewhere, probably communications, and it's usually seminarians or priests and laymen who have the joyous duty of watching us, keeping an eye on what we have to say. Not really sure the point of it, other than maybe to keep tabs on the digital world. Well, now we actually have a good idea of what they're doing with that information. They're worried about our influence on seminarians. Yes, they're actually worried about what YouTubers have to say about seminarians and what the effect we have on young men who are going to be priests. On the face of it sounds ridiculous. It really does. But there might be actually good reason for them to be worried. And America Magazine tells us this. See, they now have new rules in the Jesuit seminaries. For the first couple of years of the formation, and remember, Jesuit seminarians go through a much longer formation period than the typical diocesan seminarian will do. During the first couple of years of that, they have very limited access to social media. They go through what they're calling a sort of a digital detoxification, where they get the internet addiction out of their system. That's not a bad idea at all, by the way. We all probably could use some of that. Most of us spends way too much time online anymore, and it negatively impacts our ability to focus on things. Our attention spans are shot, all sorts of things. Not to mention all the impure films and other kinds of things that can be found on the internet. We all probably could disconnect a little bit from the internet more than we do. But their motives here aren't for necessarily mental health reasons, physical health reasons, focus, and all the rest of it. They're worried about the influence of high-profile Catholic podcasters. It sounds ridiculous, but they also tell you here, as you're about to see, what they really think of us. And not just us, the podcasters, but the people who watch them. So we go to America Magazine for this article. Remember, they're the preeminent Jesuit news source in the United States. This headline: the changing face of seminary formation, group therapy, digital detoxing, and more listening. Certainly developing a more healthier relationship with social media, digital technology, internet environment, and all the rest of it is a good idea. And remember the point of what seminary formation is about. It's to develop that relationship with God, to get people grounded in the faith, to train them to be priests, to help them get on the path of holiness and sanctity that is required to be a good priest, right? That makes sense. As well as, of course, all the theological formation and the education and stuff that goes with it. And if you ever feel like going down a rabbit hole, go read up on the Ignatian exercises and Ignatian formation processes that the Jesuits have, and it will leave you truly astonished at how the mighty Jesuits have fallen so far from the model of St. Ignatius of Loyola, their founder. But what they're doing here also lets you know what the Vatican thinks of all the commentators who give them grief. Because, yes, they very much do pay attention to us, and they make that very clear here. So, from the article, quote, near the end of this month-long meeting of the Synod on Synodality in Rome last October, Pope Francis surprised the Assembly by speaking out against something which he had grown increasingly concerned throughout the Synod's discussions: clericalism. The Pope had spent most of his time at the Assembly simply listening, perhaps because he was aware of his outsized influence in the room. On October 25th, he took to the microphone to deliver a discourse on the Church as the holy, faithful people of God, who learn a simple faith from their mothers and grandmothers. He reminded the bishops and priests present that they come from this people, and denounced those who disfigure the face of the Church with machismo and dictatorial attitudes. It is enough, he added, taking aim at a group he sees as exemplifying this attitude, to go into the ecclesiastical tailor shops in Rome to see the scandal of young priests trying on cassocks and hats, or albs and lace robes. Pope Francis is not alone in his concern about young priests. The Synod's final document expresses concern about formalism and ideology that leads to authoritarian attitudes in ordained ministers. Newspaper stories about young trad priests coming into U.S. parishes and doing away with Vatican II-era hymns in favor of Latin prayers, Gregorian chant, and thuribles full of incense are not uncommon. And as the Church works to transition to more synodal models in which a priest shares responsibility with the laity, synod meetings include the recent meeting of around 200 parish priests outside Rome have repeatedly called for changes in how priests are formed in seminaries. End quote. That's very revealing. Now, the article goes on to describe the effect of the McCarrick problems on the Church and how young seminarians have grown up in that environment, how deep-seated secrets seminarians have regarding struggles with the flesh, including impure films, maybe James Martin tendencies, and the rest, as well as related impure material you'll find on the internet, are aired out in the open during this early phase of Jesuit formation, all of which is laudable and all of which is meant to get those problems out of their system. Again, laudable. Get no critique from me on that. It also goes on to discuss how Jesuit seminarians are more traditionally minded than ever before, and you should be very happy about all that. It is all very, very good news. But then it goes on to this. Quote, "The Vatican and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops have taken some steps to address these problems, but implementing many of those changes has still taken until this past academic year. In December 2016, the Vatican's Congregation for Clergy issued a new version of its Ratio Fundamentalis Institutionis Sacerdotalis, the document of standards for seminary formation around the world, which had last been updated in 1985. Although the 2016 reversion was primarily covered in the press for barring James Martin types from entering the seminary, it also laid out a radically different approach to priestly formation, one focused on seminarian human formation. Human formation in the seminary context is a broad term that includes getting caught up on practical skills, like those Ms. Laguna mentioned, along with attending counseling or therapy to work through any issues that could negatively affect a priest's ministry. Ms. Laguna found that, like most young adults, seminarians are very open to attending counseling and therapy. Father Hosing connected the willingness to the Ted McCarrick problem, which had shaped the Church through seminarians' entire lives. When they apply to seminary, they lay it all out there. They're not hiding. They're not trying to dodge things. They're very upfront about their family history, their mental history involving issues of the flesh, their dating history because they saw the scandals of the Church, and they learned you're only as sick as your secrets, Father Hosing said. And so I think they're very self-revelatory because they want to be healthy and they want to be part of a healthy response. The key change brought about the new Ratio Fundamentalis was the institution of a proto-pedeutic stage, a sort of discernment period of 1 to 2 years in which the men entering seminary first live in a community separate from the rest of the seminary, do minimal or no coursework, and focus on their human formation and relationship with God. They can also use this time to make up for any gaps in their general education. The Vatican's 2016 guidance had to be adapted by each bishop's conference, and each adaptation then had to be approved by the Vatican. This meant the USCCB had to revise its program of priestly formation, which had last been updated in 2006. That adaptation was officially published in 2022, with instructions that would take effect in 2023-2024 academic year. In the United States, a pro-pedeutic stage lasts, almost without exception, a year. At the two seminaries whose pro-pedeutic programs were profiled in America's podcast, Inside the Vatican, Kenrick Glennon in St. Louis and Notre Dame in New Orleans, all men the proto-pedeutic stage attend counseling and have therapy available to them. Their access to social media is limited, and they spend much of their time doing manual labor on seminary grounds, reading or studying and building relationships with one another. That digital detox is particularly urgent because of how polarizing some of the online content related to Catholicism can be. Addressing the parallel formation, sometimes referred to as a shadow formation that can happen online, is a constant struggle. Father Rodriguez, the New Orleans Seminary rector, wrote in an email interview. He said that while blogs used to be the go-to for seminarians, influencers on YouTube, including the sedevacantist Taylor Marshall and the controversial psychologist Jordan Peterson, are now more popular. End quote. You heard that right, folks. They don't want their seminarians watching Taylor Marshall, whom they lie about and call a sedevacantist. Taylor Marshall is not a sedevacantist. Any sedevacantist will tell you that he is not a sedevacantist. Taylor Marshall has denied himself publicly, repeatedly, ad nauseum, that he is not a sedevacantist. I'm sure he got tired of denying that he's a sedevacantist. They calumniate him. They do the same to yours truly. They would do the same to any of the other people that sedevacantists derisively dismiss as being recognized and resist. But that's what they're afraid of. They're afraid of Taylor Marshall's influence and those of others in this sphere. Why? Because if those of us who talk about the crisis in the church quite a lot and try to correct the errors coming from Rome so that the laity don't get caught up in all the errors, if we have an audience of seminarians, then that means that if we have an effect on the hearts and minds of seminarians, they are afraid those priests are going to be rigid and not synodal. They're not going to be on board with the synodal changes, which you notice in that article. They differentiate between the preconciliar church and now. They always criticize us for being proponents of a hermeneutic of rupture when they themselves admit that there was a rupture. This synodality, which they describe as changes in the church and how the old preconciliar way of things were not valid. Do you notice, for instance, one of their critiques of these young trad priests is that they get rid of post-conciliar hymns and post-conciliar ways of doing things and bring back Gregorian chant, which Vatican II explicitly said had to have pride of place. Right along with trying to bring in Latin prayers, Vatican II explicitly said that Latin has pride of place in the church. And a bunch of other things that Vatican II said needed to be maintained in the aftermath of the council, but weren't. That is what they're afraid of. That they can't get rid of the old religion, the timeless, eternal religion. They can't get rid of it. And so now they're going to subject their seminarians to therapy because apparently this is some sort of mental affliction being a traditionalist. That is what they think of you. Curious what you think about this, so let me know in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. So does sharing this on social media. That helps too. And if you've ever thought about becoming a patron or supporter of Return to Tradition, you can do so through the join button below, through the Patreon or Subscribe Star links in the description box below. All these options asked for by some now supporters of this channel. It does help to keep these daily messages coming. Your support is greatly appreciated. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.